the missing book named in the Bible. They call it Sefer HaYashar, the Book of Jasher, also translated as the Book of the Upright. A mysterious ancient text so potent that even the Bible itself names it not once, but twice. In Joshua 10:13, during a miraculous battle in which the sun stands still, the scripture says, "Is not this written in the Book of Jasher?" Again, in 2 Samuel 1:18, as David mourns Saul and Jonathan, it reads, "Behold, it is written in the Book of Jasher." These aren't obscure references. These are bold acknowledgments of a book that once stood alongside the great texts of the faith, a book that held weight, authority, reverence, and yet today it is gone. Why? Open any modern Bible, Jewish, Christian, Catholic, or Protestant, and you will not find the Book of Jasher. It is absent, ignored, erased from canon. Some say it was lost to time. Others whisper that it was suppressed, hidden away because of what it contains, because it reveals too much. The version we have today is an ancient Hebrew manuscript translated into English in 1840, believed to be based on a much older text. Whether you accept it as authentic or not, the content inside is undeniably profound. The Book of Jasher mirrors the early chapters of Genesis and Exodus, but with astonishing additions, lost characters, enhanced events, and dangerous truths. It begins with the story of creation, like Genesis, but Jasher's version gives us a far richer tapestry. Adam is not simply the first man. He is a wise, divinely instructed ruler, taught by angels, who passes on sacred knowledge to his descendants. He teaches them how to till the ground, harvest crops, write language, and govern themselves. He is seen as the founder of human civilization, not a helpless wanderer. Eve, far from being a passive character, is described as a woman of deep sorrow and spiritual insight. She understands the consequences of the fall and pleads with God for mercy across generations. Jasher adds that she prophesied future tragedy to her children, giving her the role of a matriarchal prophetess. When Cain kills Abel, the act is not sudden. Jasher presents Cain as cold and premeditating. After their offerings are rejected, Cain lures Abel to a secluded field. He strikes him with a stone to the forehead and even tries to bury the body, thinking he could hide the crime from both man and God. God confronts Cain, yes, but Jasher adds that Cain is brought before Adam, where a council of elders, possibly even early patriarchs, pass judgment. It is the first human court, the first moral reckoning, and it reveals an early justice system woven into divine law. Then comes Enoch, the seventh generation from Adam. Genesis simply says, "And Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him." But Jasher turns Enoch into a celestial hero. He is a righteous king, ruling for over 200 years. He teaches mankind the ways of peace, astronomy, sacred timekeeping, and divine laws. People from across the lands come to sit at his feet, to learn, to worship, to change their ways. Jasher tells us that Enoch didn't just walk with God, he ascended, not through death, but through divine invitation. As the world descended into corruption, God sent angels to retrieve him. A fiery chariot descended from the heavens, and the people watched as Enoch disappeared into the skies, becoming something more than man. It was the first recorded rapture in human history, but his departure signals the end of an era. Without his guidance, evil begins to spread. Generations pass, and the descendants of Adam become numerous. Civilization advances, but something sinister returns to the earth. Fallen angels, called watchers in other ancient texts, descend from the heavens. They take human wives. From these unholy unions are born the Nephilim, giants of renown. Book of Jasher doesn't shy away from this. It goes deeper. These Nephilim are not mere tall warriors. They are abominations, beings of immense strength and insatiable hunger. They conquer cities. They enslave humankind. They teach forbidden arts, sorcery, blood sacrifice, and genetic manipulation. Yes, Jasher speaks of men and beasts being crossbred, of natural laws being violated. Creatures with mixed forms began to walk the earth, animals altered through dark knowledge. It is a chilling parallel to modern science, echoes of cloning, transgenics, and artificial life. The earth becomes filled with violence, corruption, and chaos. It is then that Noah enters the scene. But he is not merely a quiet man building a boat. Jasher describes Noah as a fiery prophet. For 120 years, he pleads with humanity to turn back to righteousness. He warns them of coming judgment. He begs them to change their ways. They laugh. They mock. They threaten him. Jasher says they tried to destroy the ark as it was being built. Angels were sent to protect it. The people saw signs, strange stars, celestial disturbances, but chose blindness over repentance. And when the day of the flood came, Jasher records a detail often overlooked. The animals came willingly. Each pair, chosen by divine wisdom, made their way to the ark. Noah did not chase them. They arrived, sensing the coming disaster. The earth shook. Waters burst from beneath the ground. The skies unleashed their fury. And as the ark rose, those left behind screamed in terror. But the door had been sealed by the hand of God. After the flood, the rise of Nimrod and the war on heaven, the floodwaters receded. The ark came to rest upon Mount Ararat, and from the wreckage of a ruined world, a new humanity was born. Noah, along with his sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, began the long, sacred task of repopulating the earth. They emerged into a land forever changed. The air carried silence. The soil was soaked in judgment, yet life once again took root. But sin was not drowned. Evil had not perished. It lingered, deep, in the hearts of men. The Book of Jasher tells us that Noah lived for centuries after the flood, watching as generations multiplied. He became a revered elder, a guardian of ancient knowledge. People came to him for wisdom, for blessings, for direction. But not all listened. The descendants of Ham, in particular, began to wander southward, towards the lush valleys of Mesopotamia. And it was there that a name emerged which would haunt history, Nimrod. The Bible calls him a mighty hunter before the Lord, but Jasher peels back the layers to reveal a tyrant cloaked in power. He was not simply a skilled warrior. He was the first king, the first to gather men beneath a banner of domination. But Nimrod held a secret. Jasher claims that he acquired the garments of Adam, sacred relics handed down through the generations. These garments were no ordinary clothes. They were crafted by God himself for Adam and Eve, imbued with divine energy. Wearing them, Nimrod became more than mortal. Animals bowed before him. Men feared him. The garments gave him an aura of invincibility. With these powers, Nimrod founded cities, Babel, Erech, Akkad, and began the construction of a kingdom unlike any before. He claimed divine favor, declared himself a god, and then he defied heaven. Nimrod gathered the nations and said, "Come, let us build a tower that reaches to the heavens. Let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be scattered across the earth." The Tower of Babel was not simply an architectural marvel. According to Jasher, it was a fortress of war, a spiritual rebellion against God. Nimrod did not want to worship the heavens. He wanted to storm them. The tower was built in layers. Soldiers, masons, and slaves toiled day and night. every brick, every stone, laid with hatred in their hearts for the Creator. Jasher describes it as a massive ziggurat, so tall that it took a year to carry supplies from the base to the top. The people said, "If heaven floods the earth again, we will climb above it. If God descends, we will fight him." They were preparing for war with God, but God came, not with fire, not with flood, but with confusion. One day, workers began shouting commands, and no one understood. Languages fractured, orders were lost. Panic spread, fights broke out. The great work halted, and the people scattered, forming the nations we now know. Jasher says the tower was partially destroyed, struck by lightning and earthquake, a divine judgment etched into the earth. But Nimrod did not die. He fled to Shinar, regrouped, and ruled with an iron fist. And it is here that another figure emerges, one who would change the course of history, Abram. Born in the very shadow of Nimrod's throne, Abram was a child destined for revolution. Jasher reveals that Nimrod's seers had a vision. A star rose in the sky, consuming 4 others. It was a sign, an omen, that a child would be born to overthrow Nimrod's empire. Terrified, Nimrod ordered that all newborn males be seized and slain, echoing the future actions of Pharaoh and even King Herod. But Abram was hidden. His father, Terah, a nobleman in Nimrod's court, defied the king and smuggled the child out into the wilderness. Abram was raised in secret caves under the watch of Noah and Shem. Yes, the same Noah who survived the flood still lived and passed on divine knowledge to the chosen child. In the caves, Abram grew wise. He looked to the stars, questioned the idols of men, and came to the conclusion that there is only one true God, not the sun, not the moon, not stone or wood. When he came of age, he returned to civilization, confronted his father's idols, and smashed them all, declaring, "There is none worthy of worship but the Creator of all things." Word reached Nimrod. The boy they had feared had returned. Nimrod summoned Abram. In a dramatic confrontation described by Jasher, Nimrod offered him riches, power, partnership in ruling the world. Abram refused. In rage, Nimrod cast him into a fiery furnace, a massive pit of flame meant to consume him before the eyes of the nation. But the fire did not burn him. For 3 days and 3 nights, Abram remained unharmed. Like a sign from heaven itself, he emerged without a single scar. The people were stunned. Some believed, others fled. Nimrod, shaken to his core, allowed him to live, but knew he had been challenged by something far greater than a man. It was the first showdown between the kingdoms of men and the kingdom of God. Abraham, angels, and the judgment of cities after emerging unscathed from Nimrod's fiery furnace. Abraham's legend only grew. He became a man feared by kings and beloved by God. His wisdom surpassed the elders. His strength of spirit could not be broken. And in the Book of Jasher, his story gains new layers, dramatic, divine, and deeply human. Abraham leaves the land of his birth and begins a sacred journey, not for conquest, but for truth. He walks through foreign lands, tears down idols, and teaches the people about the one God, the unseen Creator who made the heavens and the earth. But Abraham is not alone. The Book of Jasher describes that during these travels, he is often accompanied by angels. Messengers of the divine walk among men, not with wings or halos, but as mysterious strangers. They appear suddenly. They deliver warnings. They speak with authority and vanish without trace. One of the most striking moments comes when 3 strangers appear at Abraham's tent. Genesis tells us that Abraham welcomed them with food and drink. Jasher goes further. It describes Abraham bowing low, not out of custom, but out of recognition. He perceives a divine glow around these visitors. They are not ordinary men. They are emissaries from heaven. They sit beneath the tree. They eat and speak, and then one of them turns to Abraham and declares, "Your wife Sarah shall have a son by this time next year." Sarah, listening behind the curtain, laughs in disbelief. She is old, her womb long barren. But the angel speaks again. "Why did she laugh? Is anything too hard for the Lord?" This child, Isaac, would become the continuation of the covenant, a line that would stretch from Abraham to Moses, to David, and beyond. But before Isaac's birth, another mission unfolds, one of fire and judgment. The strangers reveal their true purpose. They are on their way to Sodom and Gomorrah, cities whose sins have reached heaven. The cries of the oppressed, the corruption, the perversions, the cruelty, they have triggered divine response. Abraham, horrified, pleads with them, "If there are 50 righteous, will you spare them?" And then 40, 30, 20, finally 10. The angels agree. If even 10 righteous remain, the cities will be spared. But Jasher adds that even the 10 cannot be found. When the angels arrive in Sodom, they find Lot, Abraham's nephew, standing at the gates. He recognizes them, not as travelers, but as beings of divine origin. He begs them to stay in his house to avoid the wrath of the city's people. That night, the city descends upon Lot's home. They demand the strangers be handed over. They shout and threaten. Jasher vividly describes a mob of thousands, men twisted by lust, pride, and violence. The angels act. They strike the mob with blindness. A sudden searing darkness. Screams erupt. People stumble and fall. The house is surrounded by chaos. Inside, the angels turn to Lot. "Gather your family, you must leave now." Lot hesitates. He pleads with his sons-in-law, but they laugh. They think he's joking. Even his own heart is torn. His life is in that city. But the angels grab his hand, his wife's and his daughter's, and they flee. The sky grows dark. Then, fire rains down from heaven. Jasher describes it not as a single act, but a sustained assault. The earth trembles. Flames consume buildings. Rivers boil. The very air burns. It is not just destruction. It is purification. Lot's wife, disobeying the warning, turns back, not out of curiosity, but out of longing. Her heart was still in Sodom. In that moment, she is transformed into a pillar of salt, a monument to disobedience. The cities vanish. What was once fertile and thriving becomes the Dead Sea, a scorched, lifeless basin. Abraham, watching from afar, sees smoke rising like a furnace and mourns. Not because judgment was unjust, but because sin had choked out mercy. As time passes, Isaac is born, a miracle child. The Book of Jasher tells us that kings from surrounding nations came to see the child, for they had heard of Sarah's old age. Some believed it was a lie, but when they saw the boy, they were silenced. Yet Abraham's trials are not over. Years later, God gives a terrifying command. "Take your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and offer him as a burnt offering on a mountain I will show you." Abraham obeys. But Jasher adds a twist. Satan appears before God, saying, "See, Abraham loves Isaac more than you. He would never sacrifice him." And so this was a test, not of cruelty, but of loyalty. Not for God's knowledge, but for the testimony of heaven and earth. Abraham climbs the mountain with Isaac. The boy, unaware of what is to come, carries the wood for his own sacrifice. At the summit, Abraham binds his son. The knife rises, In that instant, the heavens cry out. An angel appears and shouts, "Abraham, do not harm the boy. A ram is caught in the thickets. It becomes the sacrifice." Isaac is spared. Jasher describes the moment as the turning point in human faith. Proof that obedience to God is not based on reward, but on trust. A covenant sealed with blood, yet fulfilled through mercy. The legacy of the patriarchs and the lost years of Joseph. The old man Abraham died full of years. According to the Book of Jasher, his death was not just the passing of a man, it was the closing of a divine chapter. Kings, chieftains, and sages came to mourn him. Even Nimrod, Abraham's ancient rival, was said to have whispered, "No man walked with such favor from the heavens." But as Abraham's flame dimmed, new stars rose. Isaac, now a grown man, carried the covenant forward. He too had faced trials, and in time he and Rebekah bore twin sons, Esau and Jacob. The Bible tells us that Esau was a hunter, a man of the field, while Jacob was quiet, dwelling in tents. But Jasher reveals more. A rivalry born in the womb, foretold to shake nations. As they grew, it became clear Esau chased pleasure and power, often straying from the path. Jacob sought wisdom, staying close to the traditions of Abraham. He studied with Shem and Eber, keepers of the ancient knowledge. One day, Esau returned from hunting, hungry and desperate. He sold his birthright, the divine inheritance of the firstborn, for a mere bowl of lentils. Jasher paints this not as a rash mistake, but a spiritual failing, a sign of his rejection of sacred duty. Later, Isaac, blind with age, intended to bless Esau, but Rebekah intervened. She knew the truth whispered by God. Jacob was the chosen one. So Jacob, clothed in Esau's garments, approached Isaac. The deception was not done out of greed, but out of prophetic necessity. The blessing passed to Jacob. Esau raged. He vowed to kill his brother. Jacob fled into the wilderness, journeying toward his uncle Laban's home. Along the way, he had a dream, a ladder reaching from earth to heaven, with angels ascending and descending. Jasher emphasizes this moment as the fusion of two worlds, the earthly and the divine, centered on one man. But Jacob's exile was not easy. He worked 7 years for Rachel, only to be tricked into marrying her sister Leah. Then 7 more years for the woman he loved. Out of this complex family would come 12 sons, the future tribes of Israel. Among them was Joseph. The Book of Jasher paints Joseph in radiant detail. As a boy, he was favored by Jacob, hated by his brothers. But Jasher goes further. It tells of Joseph's divine dreams and his innate ability to perceive the spirit world. He saw things others could not. His visions were clear and disturbing. His brothers, consumed by jealousy, plotted his death. They threw him into a pit, sold him to passing merchants. They told Jacob he was dead, but Joseph was not dead. He was descending into destiny. In Egypt, he was sold to Potiphar, a powerful officer. Jasher describes Joseph's rise, not just through charm, but through his unshakable faith. Even when falsely accused by Potiphar's wife and thrown into prison, Joseph did not curse God. There, in the darkness, he interpreted dreams. One day, Pharaoh himself had a vision: 7 fat cows consumed by 7 lean ones. Joseph, summoned from prison, unlocked the prophecy. 7 years of plenty followed by 7 years of famine. Pharaoh was astonished. He made Joseph ruler of all Egypt, second only to the throne. Years passed. Famine gripped the region. Back in Canaan, Jacob and his sons were starving. They traveled to Egypt, seeking food. And there, Before them stood the brother they had betrayed, Joseph, now dressed in royal robes. They did not recognize him. But Joseph remembered everything. He tested them. And when he saw their regret, their humility, he revealed himself. Jasher records the reunion in emotional detail: tears, embraces, and forgiveness. Joseph wept aloud, and the entire palace heard his cry. The family was reunited. Jacob moved to Egypt with his sons, and before he died, he blessed each of them, giving prophetic words that echoed for generations. But the Book of Jasher doesn't stop there. It recounts the final words of Joseph, words missing from most other texts. He tells his family that the time will come when their descendants will be enslaved, but that a deliverer will rise, one sent by God, carrying signs and wonders. He says, "When my bones are carried out of Egypt, know that redemption is near." Generations passed. A new Pharaoh arose, one who forgot Joseph and saw the Israelites as a threat. The chains were forged. The oppression began. But as Jasher concludes, it speaks of a child, born in secret, hidden in reeds, raised in the very house of Pharaoh Moses, the deliverer. The book closes, not with an end, but with a bridge, a transition from patriarchs to prophets, from exile to exodus. It gives the missing pieces. It stitches the timeline together. It is not a book of fantasy, but of remembrance. And yet, why was the Book of Jasher removed? Why is it only referenced, never canonized? Perhaps because it tells too much. Because it dares to show the divine-human relationship in fuller color, richer, stranger, and more intimate than tradition allows. It reminds us that history is not written only by victors, but preserved by truth seekers, those willing to look beyond the surface.